I never thought I'd be the kind of man to fall for a lie. 50 years of marriage should have meant something. It should have been real. But as I sat there, staring at the text message glowing on my wife's phone, I realized that everything I believed in was nothing but a carefully crafted illusion. The message wasn't long. Just a few words. But those words burned themselves into my brain like a brand searing into flesh. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Same time tomorrow? At first, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. I wasn't some naive kid. I was a man who had built a life, raised a family, provided for a woman who had stood beside me through decades of ups and downs. And yet, here it was. Proof that the woman I trusted most had betrayed me in the most disgusting way possible. My hands shook as I placed the phone back on the nightstand, right where she had left it. She was still in the bathroom, the sound of running water masking the storm raging inside me. I could hear her humming softly, as if nothing was wrong. As if she hadn't just shattered my world. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Confronting her now would accomplish nothing. If she had been lying to me for this long, she would only lie again. No. I needed more. I needed to know everything before I made my move. By the time she stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, flashing me that familiar smile, I had already made my decision. I was going to destroy her. But first, I needed to find out just how deep this betrayal went. I smiled back at her. Pretended nothing was wrong. She had no idea that her time was running out. I barely slept that night. My body lay still, but my mind was a hurricane of thoughts, each one more vicious than the last. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message burning in the darkness. My wife, the woman I had spent my entire life loving and protecting, was sneaking around like a cheap adulteress. I turned onto my side and looked at her. She was fast asleep, her breathing slow and steady. How could she sleep so peacefully while my entire world was crumbling? I clenched my fists under the blanket. Not yet. I can't lose control. I needed to know more before I confronted her. Who was she seeing? How long had this been going on? Was it just one affair, or had my entire marriage been a lie? As I stared at the ceiling, I formed my plan. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering evidence. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had changed. When she woke up, I kissed her on the cheek, pretending to be the same husband she had always known. She smiled at me, completely unaware that I was already playing a game she couldn't win. She left for her usual morning walk, something she had been doing for years. Except now, I wasn't so sure it was just about staying healthy. I waited 10 minutes before following her. My heart pounded as I trailed behind at a safe distance. She walked through our neighborhood like normal, waving at neighbors, stopping to chat with Mrs. Anderson, the sweet old widow who lived 2 houses down. Everything looked normal. Then, as soon as she turned the corner near the park, she picked up her pace. She wasn't just walking, she was rushing. I followed her carefully, making sure to stay out of sight. And that's when I saw him. A man was waiting for her near a black sedan. Tall. Fit. Younger than me. Maybe late 40s. They didn't even look around. She walked straight up to him, smiling, and he pulled her into an embrace. Not a quick, friendly hug. No. This was different. This was a lover's embrace. I felt the rage rise inside me like a wildfire. This wasn't just some silly flirtation. This was real. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached, but I forced myself to stay hidden. I needed to see more. They spoke for a moment, then got into his car. I didn't hesitate. I ran back to my truck, started the engine, and followed them. They drove across town, pulling into a small diner, one I didn't recognize. Somewhere private, far from familiar eyes. I parked a few spots away and watched as they entered the building. Through the window, I saw them sit at a booth near the back. He reached across the table, taking her hands in his, rubbing his thumb over her skin. She laughed. My wife, the woman who always told me she loved me, the woman who held my hand at our son's funeral, the woman who kissed me goodnight for decades, was laughing in the arms of another man. Something inside me snapped. I wanted to walk in there and tear the place apart. To grab him by the collar and slam his face into the table. To make him bleed for touching what was mine. But I didn't. No. That would be too easy. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took pictures. I needed proof. I watched them for over an hour, documenting every touch, every look, every stolen moment. When they finally left, he walked her back to his car and kissed her, right there in the parking lot. That's when I saw something that sent a bolt of ice through my veins. She took out her phone and typed something. A second later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A message from my wife. Hey honey, just finished my walk thinking about grabbing coffee before heading home. Love you. Lying. To my face. In real time. I gripped my steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a goddamn insult. She got into his car, and they drove off again. I followed. I didn't even know where they were going, but I knew one thing for sure. She had no idea that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. I drove after them, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. She thought she was untouchable. That she could smile in my face, kiss me goodnight, and then fall into another man's arms like I was nothing. She had no idea what was coming. I stayed a few cars behind, keeping my distance as they pulled onto the highway. Where the hell were they going? I had expected a hotel, maybe his house, but they kept driving, miles out of town, past familiar streets, past anything that made sense. Then, after nearly 30 minutes, they turned onto a long, winding road leading to a secluded house on the outskirts of town. A love nest. I parked far enough away to remain hidden, but close enough to see. They got out of the car, laughing like teenagers sneaking away from their parents. I felt my stomach twist. 50 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, and here she was, giggling and touching another man like she was some high school girl in love for the first time. They went inside. I clenched my fists, staring at the house. Every instinct in me screamed to storm in, to catch them in the act, to make them regret ever crossing me. But that wasn't enough. If I acted now, she'd walk away with nothing but a guilty conscience. No, I needed to take my time. I needed to make sure when she fell, she never got up again. I pulled out my phone. Time to find out who the hell this guy was. Within minutes, I had what I needed. His name was Daniel Carter. A senior partner at a financial firm in the city. Married. 2 kids. Active in his church, respected in his community. A man who had just as much to lose as she did. Interesting. I opened my camera and began taking pictures. Every angle. Every detail. If he wanted to play games with my wife, I'd make sure the whole world knew exactly what kind of man he really was. For nearly 2 hours, they stayed inside. My mind raced with possibilities. What was she telling him about me? Was she laughing at me? Telling him I was boring? That I didn't satisfy her anymore? She was lying to my face. Pretending everything was fine while sneaking off like a common whore. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from her. Just leaving the store, honey. Do you need anything? My vision blurred with rage. She was in that house, in that man's bed, sending me messages like she was out running errands. I forced myself to stay calm. She was digging her own grave, and she didn't even know it. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, they emerged. She smoothed down her blouse, adjusting her hair, while he grinned like a man who had just won the lottery. Disgusting. I took more pictures. They kissed again before getting into their separate cars. I let her leave first. No need for her to suspect anything. Instead, I followed Daniel. He drove straight home, to a beautiful house in the suburbs, where a woman in a sundress was watering the flowers in their front yard. His wife. Perfect. I parked down the street, watching as he walked up and kissed her on the cheek. I wondered if she had any idea where his lips had just been. If she had any idea that her husband had spent the afternoon violating every vow he had ever made to her. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my wife. Traffic is terrible today. I'll be home soon. Love you. Lying. Again. I nearly laughed. She had no idea that, in a matter of days, she was going to lose everything. I started my truck and drove home. It was time to set my plan into motion. I drove home with one thought burning in my mind: they were both going to pay. My wife and her pathetic little boyfriend thought they were so clever, sneaking around behind my back, sending me fake texts while she was busy spreading her legs in some love nest. She thought I was a fool. She had no idea that I had just gathered enough ammunition to burn her world to the ground. I pulled into the driveway just as she was stepping inside, her purse slung over her shoulder, her face carefully composed. "Hey, honey," she chirped, flashing me that same smile she had been giving me for 50 damn years. Fake. Hollow. A lie. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice calm, my expression neutral. I watched her carefully, noticing the little details I had been too blind to see before. Her hair was too neatly brushed for someone who had supposedly been out for a quick errand. The faintest hint of perfume lingered in the air. Not her usual scent, the one she wore on special occasions. She walked up to me, kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I forced a smile. Not yet. She wasn't ready to know what was coming. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yeah," I nodded. "Just tired." If only she knew. She turned away, heading into the kitchen to start dinner. I watched her like a predator watches its prey. This woman had been my everything. I had worked my whole life to give her comfort, to give her security, to make sure she never had to struggle. And what did she do? She threw it all away for some cheap thrill. I clenched my jaw. I wasn't just going to leave her. That would be too easy. I was going to make sure she lost everything. The next morning, I woke up early. She was still asleep beside me, breathing evenly, her body curled under the blankets. It took everything in me not to drag her out of bed and throw her out of the house. Instead, I got up quietly and went downstairs. I had a plan to set in motion. Step 1, destroy her life, piece by piece. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. I already had Daniel Carter's name, his address, and his job. But I needed more. I found his wife's Facebook profile first. Karen Carter. A sweet-looking woman, blonde hair, smiling with her 2 kids in every picture. A picture-perfect family. Too bad it was about to be shuttered. I clicked through her friends list. She was well-connected. PTA meetings, charity events, even some high society gatherings. This was a woman who valued her reputation. Perfect. I copied her email address. Then I did the same for Daniel's boss. If he wanted to play games, let's see how he liked it when his boss found out what kind of man he was. Finally, I printed out every single picture I had taken of them. The hand-holding, the kisses, the love nest. Undeniable proof. By the time my wife woke up, I was already sipping my coffee, smiling at her like nothing was wrong. "Morning, babe," she said sleepily, leaning down to kiss me. I let her. Because in just a few days, that kiss would be the last thing she'd ever have from me. That afternoon, while she was out running errands again, I made my first move. I sent an anonymous email to Karen Carter. Subject: Your husband is not who you think he is. I attached the pictures. Every single one. No explanation. No threats. Just the cold, hard truth. Then, I sent another email to Daniel's boss. Subject: Employee conduct concern. You might want to take a look at what your senior partner has been up to. This might not reflect well on your firm. Another set of pictures attached. I smiled as I hit send. Now, we wait. That evening, when my wife came home, she had no idea that a storm was already brewing. She kissed me, cooked dinner, talked about her day like nothing was wrong. I sat there, nodding, listening, knowing that in just a few days, her whole world would collapse around her. And the best part? She had no idea that it was all because of me. The next morning, I woke up early, well rested for the first time in days. The rage was still there, burning in my chest, but now it had a direction. A purpose. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was in control. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, checking my emails. And then I saw it. A response from Karen Carter. The subject line read, "What the hell is this?" I smirked and clicked. Her message was frantic, filled with disbelief, anger, horror. Who are you? Is this some kind of sick joke? Where did you get these pictures? I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the satisfaction settle in. She was panicking. That was good. That was exactly what I wanted. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because I knew what was coming next. And it came faster than I expected. My wife strolled into the kitchen a few minutes later, still in her robe, stretching and yawning like she hadn't spent yesterday wrapped around another man. I studied her. She had no idea. "Morning, honey," she said, kissing my cheek. "You're up early." "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Couldn't sleep." She poured herself some coffee and sat across from me. It was almost disgusting, how normal she was acting. And then her phone buzzed. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and her entire body tensed. She quickly put the phone face down on the table and tried to act casual, but I saw it. Panic. She took a sip of her coffee, staring into the cup like she suddenly lost her appetite. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Another email. This time, from Daniel's boss. This is highly inappropriate behavior for someone in Daniel Carter's position. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, this matter will be dealt with immediately. I grinned. Perfect. Daniel was about to have the worst day of his life, and he didn't even know it yet. And my wife? She was about to find out. An hour later, as I was finishing breakfast, she got a call. She hesitated before answering, but I could tell by the way she gripped her phone that she already knew who it was. "Hello," she said, trying to sound casual. I watched. Waited. Her eyes widened. What? No, that's not possible. She stood up, clutching the phone to her ear. Who told you that? I took another sip of coffee. Oh, this was beautiful. She ran out of the room, but I followed, standing just outside the doorway, listening. Karen, please, you have to listen to me. It's not what it looks like. Ah. So Daniel's wife had confronted him. And Daniel, the coward, had immediately thrown my wife under the bus. I could hear Karen screaming through the phone. My wife tried to calm her down, but it was useless. You can't tell John, my wife hissed into the phone. He doesn't know anything. I smiled. Oh, sweetheart, if only you knew. By noon, it was all falling apart. I saw my wife pacing in the living room, phone in hand, her face pale and tight with stress. Her perfect little world was crumbling. Then, as if the universe wanted to give me one last gift, the house phone rang. She answered it. And froze. What do you mean Daniel's been fired? Ah. So the office had found out. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching as she completely lost her mind. Her hand covered her mouth, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw her truly afraid. She started shaking. No, 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 this can't be happening. What did he say? Who told you? There was a long pause, and then she sank into the couch, burying her face in her hands. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I didn't need to. I already knew what was being said. Daniel had been caught. His entire career, gone. And the best part? They both knew someone had exposed them. But they had no idea it was me. I let her suffer for the rest of the day, watched as she made frantic calls, texted Daniel, tried to control the damage. But there was no fixing this. She had ruined everything. And it was only going to get worse. Because tomorrow? She was going to find out that I knew everything. And I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to destroy her. I sat in my chair, watching my wife unravel before my eyes. She paced the living room, gripping her phone like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale. She had just gotten off the phone with Daniel, and from the few words I could hear, it wasn't a pleasant conversation. She was in full-blown panic mode. I sipped my coffee, enjoying the show. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment she realized her perfect little world was beginning to crumble into dust. And the best part? She still had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. I waited for her to speak first. She turned to me, forcing a smile, though I could see the cracks forming in her carefully crafted mask. You okay? I asked, my voice casual. Yeah, she nodded too quickly. Just a little stressed. Work stuff. Liar. She sat down across from me, running a hand through her hair. I could see the thoughts racing through her mind. Did I know? Had I found out? I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm. She was afraid. Good. Then, finally, she cleared her throat. John, do you think we could go out to dinner tonight? Just the two of us? I almost laughed. Desperate already, aren't you? Trying to make me feel special. Trying to cover your tracks. Sure, I said, smiling. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but I could still see the tension in her eyes. She was scrambling. She could feel everything slipping away. She just didn't know how deep the fall was going to be. That afternoon, while she was out running errands, or more likely, trying to put out the fires that had just started, I made my next move. Step 1, destroy her reputation. I took my phone and started texting. A carefully crafted message, sent to the one person I knew would spread it like wildfire. Nancy. She was the biggest gossip in town, a woman who thrived on knowing everyone's business. If something scandalous happened, Nancy would make sure everyone knew about it by morning. I typed out a message. Hey, Nancy. I just found out something shocking, and I don't know what to do. I feel so lost. Can I trust you? I knew she wouldn't be able to resist. Within minutes, my phone dinged. Of course, honey. What happened? Are you okay? Hook. Line. Sinker. I hesitated just long enough to make it look real. Then I sent another text. I just found out Mary's been cheating on me, for months. With Daniel Carter. I attached a single photo, the one of my wife kissing him in the parking lot. Then I turned off my phone and waited. Because once Nancy got a hold of this, the whole town would know by sundown. By the time dinner rolled around, the damage had already begun. Mary dressed up more than usual. I could tell she was trying to act like everything was normal, like she wasn't one wrong step away from losing everything. She smiled at me over the table, but I saw the nervous energy in her hands. "So," she said, stirring her drink. "How was your day?" I smirked. "Oh, you have no idea." "It was good," I said. "Quiet." She nodded quickly, glancing around the restaurant like she was checking for ghosts. And then, her phone buzzed. She picked it up. And froze. Her face drained of color, her fingers tightening around the glass in front of her. Her breathing became shallow, erratic. And I just watched. Waited. Because I already knew what she was seeing. Nancy had started talking. And now? The whole town knew she was a cheating whore. She swallowed hard and forced a smile. "John, I..." But before she could finish, a voice cut through the restaurant. "Mary? Oh my God." She stiffened. I turned my head just in time to see Susan, one of her so-called friends, standing near our table, her eyes wide. "I just saw something on Facebook," Susan continued, voice dripping with fake concern. "Is it true?" Mary's lips parted, her entire body trembling. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Then Susan turned to me. "John, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this." Mary shot up from her seat. "Susan, let's not do this here." But it was too late. People were already staring. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? Mary was sleeping with Daniel Carter. His wife kicked him out. I can't believe she would do that to John." Mary looked around, her face a mask of horror. I just sat back and enjoyed my drink. She grabbed my arm. "John, please." I looked up at her, taking my time before responding. Then I leaned forward, my voice low and calm. "Enjoying the attention, sweetheart?" Her face crumpled. I didn't." I smirked. "Oh, you did. And now everyone knows." Her hands started to shake. She turned, bolting from the restaurant like a coward. I didn't follow. I finished my drink, left cash on the table, and walked out, letting her drown in the wreckage she created. Because this was only the beginning. I walked out of the restaurant at my own pace, calm, in control. Meanwhile, my wife had bolted like a coward, running from the whispers, the stares, the judgment. She had spent years living a lie. Now, she was trapped in it. And I wasn't done yet. I drove home, humming to myself as I pulled into the driveway. I expected to see her car parked outside. It wasn't. Interesting. I stepped inside, poured myself a drink, and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still no sign of her. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. "Where are you, Mary?" And then, my phone buzzed. A message. From her. "John, please. I need to talk to you." I let her wait. 2 minutes. 5. 10. Then I replied. "Go ahead. Talk." She responded almost instantly. "Not like this. Please, can we meet? I need to explain." "Explain?" I nearly laughed. What was there to explain? The texts? The love nest? The way she kissed him like she used to kiss me? I took another sip of my drink. Then I typed back. "Meet me at home." But Mary? I let the silence hang before sending the next message. Don't lie to me again. She arrived 15 minutes later, stepping through the door like a ghost of the woman I once knew. Her face was puffy, her eyes red from crying. Good. She deserved to cry. I said nothing. Just watched. She hesitated. Then, finally, she spoke. John, I raised a hand. Sit. She obeyed. For the first time in our entire marriage, she looked small. Not because I had yelled. Not because I had threatened her. But because she knew I had all the power now. I never meant for this to happen, she stammered. I swear, John, I pulled out my phone. Swiped through the pictures. Then I tossed it onto the table between us. She flinched, looking down. And then she saw. Every single picture. The kisses. The hotel meetings. The little secret moments she thought no one would ever see. Her hands flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I leaned back. Go ahead, Mary. Explain. She was breathing too fast now, struggling to form words. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to. I let out a slow, cold chuckle. Didn't mean to? I repeated. What, Mary? You didn't mean to spread your legs? Didn't mean to sneak around? Didn't mean to make a fool out of me? She flinched. John, I love you, No. I said it so sharply she actually jumped. You don't love me, Mary, I continued. You love what I gave you. The security. The house. The perfect little life. But you didn't love me enough to be loyal, did you? Her lips quivered. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? She was silent. Say it, I said. Be honest for once in your life. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because I was bored, she whispered. I don't even know why I did it, John. It was stupid. I was stupid. I smiled. Yes. You were. John, she sniffed. Can we fix this? I almost laughed. Fix this? I asked. Mary, tell me, how do you expect me to fix 50 years of lies? Her eyes widened. You leaving me? I took a deep breath. No, Mary. She blinked, confused. Then I dropped the bomb. I'm kicking you out. Her mouth fell open. What? I stood up, pulling an envelope from my pocket. This is a separation agreement, I said. I suggest you sign it before I decide to take you for everything you have. She shook her head violently. John, you can't just. Yes, I can, I interrupted. And I already have. I grabbed another envelope from the table and tossed it toward her. That, I said, is the deed to the house. Your name is no longer on it. She gasped. That's impossible. It's legal, I said. While you were off screwing around, I was making sure this house is mine and mine alone. She grabbed the papers with trembling hands, flipping through them. Her face turned white. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I shrugged. Maybe Daniel has a spare room. Her face crumpled. I picked up my drink, taking a slow sip. Then I delivered the final blow. Oh wait, I said. He doesn't, does he? She looked up, confused. I smiled. Cold. Cruel. You didn't hear? I said. Karen kicked him out. Her breathing stopped. And he lost his job, I continued. And his house? Foreclosed. Mary's lips quivered. No. I tilted my head. So tell me, Mary, I said, mocking her own words back at her. Where will you go? Her shoulders shook, and for the first time in our entire marriage, I saw real fear in her eyes. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, I said, you have 24 hours to pack your things. Her breath hitched. But after that? I smirked. I never want to see your face again. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Not because I was hurt. But because I wanted to savor every second of what was about to happen. Down the hall, I could hear Mary sobbing into her pillow. The same woman who had spent months sneaking behind my back, lying to my face, betraying 50 years of marriage was now crying like a victim. Pathetic. I poured myself a drink, sat back in my chair, and smiled. By tomorrow, she'd be gone. Out of my house. Out of my life. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. Morning came fast. I woke up early, took my time showering, made myself breakfast. I wanted her to see how unbothered I was. She walked into the kitchen like a ghost, her face pale, her eyes swollen. I didn't even acknowledge her. Instead, I placed a cup of coffee in front of myself, opened the newspaper, and enjoyed the silence. She hesitated, then finally spoke. John. Please. I slowly folded the paper and looked at her. Her hands were trembling. Please don't do this, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. I took a slow sip of coffee. Not my problem. She flinched like I had slapped her. You don't mean that, she tried again. We can fix this. I leaned forward, my voice cold. Mary, I said, you've already been replaced. She inhaled sharply. What? I smirked. Did you really think I'd spend my retirement crying over a woman who threw away 50 years? I asked. I deserve better. And trust me, sweetheart, I'm getting it. She shook her head violently. No, you lying. I just laughed. Cruel. Cold. Unforgiving. Get your things, Mary, I said. You have an hour. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She knew she had lost. And now? She was just another discarded piece of trash. I watched her pack. Every few minutes, she'd stop and cry, like that would make me change my mind. It didn't. When the hour was up, I stood by the door, arms crossed. Time's up. She turned to me, shaking. Where will I go? I shrugged. Not my problem. She let out a sob. Then, with one last desperate move, she reached out, trying to touch me. John, please. I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said. You lost that right the moment you spread your legs for another man. Her face crumbled. And that was the last thing I saw before I shut the door in her face. I poured myself another drink, sat back in my chair, and smiled. Because while Mary was now officially out of my life, there was one last piece of unfinished business. Daniel Carter. That son of a bitch had destroyed my marriage. Now, it was time to destroy him. I pulled out my phone, dialed a number, and waited. After a few rings, a voice answered. Hello? I smiled. Karen, I said. We need to talk. I sat back in my chair, the weight of 50 years finally lifting off my shoulders. She was gone. No more fake kisses. No more lies. No more betrayal. Mary had walked out of my house with nothing but a suitcase full of regrets, and now? She was someone else's problem. But I wasn't done yet. because while she was out on the street, the man who helped destroy my marriage was still walking free. Daniel Carter. That smug, cheating bastard thought he could screw my wife and walk away untouched. He was wrong. Very, very wrong. I took my phone and dialed the number. After a few rings, a voice answered. Hello? It was Karen Carter, Daniel's now ex-wife. She sounded exhausted, broken. Good. Karen, I said smoothly. It's John. There was a long pause. Then, a sigh. I was wondering when you'd call, she said. I smirked. Of course she was. Karen and I had one thing in common, we both wanted revenge. I take it Daniel's not having a good time? I asked. She let out a humorless laugh. He's living in a motel, she said. His boss fired him, our savings are frozen because of the divorce, and the house? Foreclosure notice came yesterday. I smiled. Beautiful. And Mary, she asked. Gone, I replied. I kicked her out this morning. Another pause. Then Karen said something that made my night. John, she murmured. How do you feel about finishing what we started? Karen wasn't stupid. She knew destroying Daniel's career wasn't enough. We needed to take the last thing he had left, his reputation. You know, she said, Daniel had a lot of secrets. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? He's been embezzling money from his firm for years, she said. Nothing big enough to raise alarms, but enough to line his pockets. Now that was interesting. If we could expose that, Daniel wouldn't just be broke and homeless. He'd be behind bars. She was nothing like I expected, tall, elegant, the kind of woman who could command a room without saying a word. I could see why Daniel married her. I could also see why he lost her. We sat across from each other in a quiet bar, going over the details. I still have access to his laptop, she said, taking a sip of her wine. And his emails. If I can find proof of the embezzlement. He's finished, I completed. Karen smirked. Exactly. I leaned back, nodding. Then let's ruin him. The next day, Karen sent me everything. Emails. Bank statements. Transaction records. All of it. She was right, Daniel had been stealing money from his company for years. Enough to get him locked up for a long, long time. I forwarded the information to his old boss, to the IRS, to the local news. Then, I waited. And it didn't take long. By noon, Daniel's name was all over the internet. Former executive under investigation for fraud. Daniel Carter's scandalous downfall. And the best part? The mugshot. Yep. Daniel got arrested. I grinned as I scrolled through the news, sipping my coffee. That's what you get for touching another man's wife, Daniel. Karen called me that night. Well, she said, sounding pleased. That was satisfying. I chuckled. That's one word for it. There was a long pause. Then she asked, so, what happens now? I knew what she meant. The revenge was over. The war was won. But something told me, this wasn't the last time Karen and I would talk. I smirked. How about dinner? I asked. She laughed softly. John, are you asking me on a date? Let's just say I'd rather celebrate with someone who actually knows what loyalty means, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then. Pick me up at 7. I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning up my shirt. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The weight of betrayal was gone. The pain? Buried. And now? I was free. Tonight, I wasn't thinking about my ex-wife crying on some stranger's couch. I wasn't thinking about Daniel rotting in a jail cell. Tonight? I had a date. I pulled up to the restaurant right at 7. Karen was already waiting, leaning casually against the entrance. She was wearing a dark red dress, sleek and elegant. She looked different. Powerful. Confident. Unbreakable. I smiled. "You clean up nice," I said. She smirked. "So do you." The hostess led us to a quiet table in the back. I ordered a whiskey. She ordered wine. For a moment, we just sat there, letting the weight of the last few weeks settle between us. Then Karen leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "How does it feel?" she asked. I took a sip of my drink. "Like victory." She laughed. "I'll drink to that." Our glasses clinked together. For the first time in years, I wasn't drinking to forget. I was drinking to celebrate. Across town, Mary was unraveling. She had nowhere to go. No house, no husband, no future. She had called Daniel, no answer. She had called old friends, they ignored her. Even Nancy, the town gossip, had cut her off. Nobody wanted to be associated with a woman whose entire life had gone up in flames. She was truly alone. And Daniel? He wasn't doing much better. Sitting in a cold jail cell, waiting for his lawyer to return his calls, he had time to reflect on his choices. On how he had lost everything. His career. His family. His money. All because he thought he could take what belonged to another man. Actions have consequences. I hoped he enjoyed learning that lesson the hard way. Karen and I were halfway through dinner when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. An unknown number. I smirked. "Want to guess who this is?" I asked Karen. She raised an eyebrow. "Mary?" I nodded. "Or Daniel, begging for help." I let it ring. Then I declined the call. Because the truth was? I didn't care anymore. Their lives were ruined. Just like they deserved. I looked across the table at Karen. For the first time in decades, I felt like I was with someone I could trust. Someone who had been through hell and come out stronger. I lifted my glass. "To new beginnings," I said. She smiled. "To justice," she corrected. We drank to both. And just like that? My old life was over. And my new one had just begun.